Chapter 755. Dong. That person's figure landed on the square in the palace. He was dressed in a dark blue robe, outlining his iron-blooded and domineering aura. Old Master Luo's face was filled with excitement as he looked at the beautiful woman who was sitting under the canopy of the luxurious building in front of him. I'm here to marry you," he said resolutely. That pair of affectionate eyes looked at Empress Dowager Yanxi. After decades, he finally had the opportunity to stand in front of the woman he loved most and say such words. Old Master Luo originally thought that he would miss Yanxi in this lifetime. Just like that time when he killed his way out of the beast tied deep in the mountains, he only had time to see a corner of her clothes slide down the cliff in front of his eyes. In this life he did not owe his family, nor did he owe anyone. He only owed her one sentence: he did not let her down in this life. "I'm here to pick you up." Impudent. Old Master Luo's voice came out, and in an instant Great Yang's 7th prince shouted angrily. His plan was ruined, and the person who came seemed to have an old relationship with Empress Dowager Yanxi. Great Yang's 7th prince, who had long regarded Empress Dowager Yanxi as his exclusive property, instantly had a déjà vu of being cuckolded. Looking at Old Master Luo standing on the square of the main hall, his face was angry. "You're just a marquis from an inferior country. Who gave you the guts to say such things to the Empress Dowager of the Sacred Dynasty? What qualifications do you have to come and propose? Do you have the ability to compete with this prince? A mere marquis of an inferior country?" Great Yang's 7th prince's words immediately caused the expressions of many Great Chu officials present to change. They did not care if Old Master Luo had an old relationship with Empress Dowager Yanxi, as long as he could stop Great Yang's conspiracy. What's more, it would be better if he really had an old relationship with Empress Dowager Yanxi. After all, it was naturally better to choose a person who had an affair with the Empress Dowager than to choose the 7th prince who was eyeing Great Chu covetously. But a marquis of an inferior country. Could he stop Great Yang's conspiracy? This was what the officials of Great Chu were worried about. They had put all their hopes on Old Master Luo. Now that they heard Great Yang's 7th prince's words, they were shocked and instantly turned cold. A marquis from an inferior country, the other party's strength might not even be as strong as a bodyguard of the 7th prince of Yong. How could they stop the 7th prince of Great Yang's conspiracy? After all, since they were asking for the Empress Dowager's hand in marriage, they naturally had to compete. Regardless of family background or financial resources, Grandfather Luo was clearly no match for Great Yang's 7th prince. All of Empress Dowager Yanxi's attention was on Old Master Luo. She looked at the valiant figure standing on the square. She almost used up all the strength in her body to restrain herself from immediately getting up and flying over. At this moment, hearing Great Yang's 7th prince's words, her complexion changed as she looked worriedly at Grandfather Luo. At this moment, a faint and leisurely voice suddenly sounded from the red and green spirit ship. "Then what does Great Yang's 7th prince feel is qualified to compete with you?" As this voice rang out, a figure slowly appeared at the entrance of the spirit ship. Luo Qingtong looked indifferent. With her hands behind her back, she waved her sleeves and slowly walked down from the spirit ship. Chapter 756. Everyone looked at the figure walking down from the airship. In an instant, everyone fell silent. The young girl's face was like a hibiscus, her skin was smooth and creamy, and her pair of elegant eyebrows were like the flowers of the distant mountains. Under a light touch, it was a breathtaking charm. Her nose was slightly pointed, her eyebrows were creamy, and her cheeks were rosy. The hint of a smile on his lips revealed a devilish aura, absolutely charming and domineering. That graceful and leisurely posture, that peerless beauty, everyone's gaze involuntarily looked at Luo Qingtong and then at xuanhuan. They were not inferior in the slightest. In fact, Luo Qingtong's posture and appearance were slightly better than xuanhuan's. If they didn't know that xuanhuan was the princess of the Great Yong dynasty, they would have mistakenly thought that Luo Qingtong was the peerless and graceful princess that could only be raised under the majestic Great Yong dynasty. After all, her appearance and bearing were not inferior in the slightest. Low-level small country? Everyone couldn't help but recall the words of the Great Yong's 7th prince just now, and they were suddenly filled with doubts. Was this pair of grandfather and granddaughter really from a marquis household in a low-level small country? Could a lowly family from such a lowly country really raise such a graceful, noble, and gorgeous young lady? Everyone's gaze was fixed on Luo Qingtong, and from time to time, they would look at xuanhuan. Looking at these gazes, the latter was indescribably angry. However, xuanhuan didn't expect Luo Qingtong to be so outstanding. Looking at the young girl walking down from the airship, she couldn't help but admit that Luo Qingtong's aura was not something that the legitimate daughter of a marquis household in a low-level small country could possess. She would believe it even if the other party was the princess of the Great Yong dynasty. The Luo family's Qingtong was actually such a beautiful young girl. Then why did the royal family of Tianyu dislike her so much? Xuanhuan had never seen Luo Qingtong before, and had only heard of her existence from others. He knew that she was Yu Wenma's fiancée, but neither he nor Tianyu's royal family liked her. She had thought that the other party was merely the first daughter of an ordinary marquis, and the kind that was especially unpresentable. She couldn't even compare to the young ladies of the empire's great clans. But who would have thought that the other party was actually so magnificent? Even if no one said it, their eyes clearly told Xuanhuan that she had been suppressed. He had been suppressed by a young girl from a low-level family that came from a low-level family from a low-level country. Xuanhuan's eyes were cold. She looked at Luo Qingtong, who was standing in front of grandfather Luo, and said coldly, "Luo Qingtong? Miss Luo? This doesn't seem to be a place where you can interrupt, right?" When she said this, she coldly raised her head and looked at Luo Qingtong with an aloof gaze. "Your grandfather, as Empress Dowager Yanxi's pursuer, has the qualifications to talk to us. But who are you to stand here and talk to us? This highness is the first princess of the Great Yong dynasty, and my uncle is the 7th prince of Great Yong. What kind of identity and confidence do you have to dare to stand in front of us and talk to us? Before you ask, kneel down and greet us." Saying this, she coldly flicked her sleeves and looked at Luo Qingtong. So what if she was extraordinarily beautiful and had an extraordinary temperament? Since he had overpowered her, she would overpower him again. With the other party's identity, what could she use to compare with her? Evil Dr. Ghost, I was able to invite people from the Black Domain to support her. Could it be that he could give her a more prominent identity than his? Chapter 757. F***CK. In Luo Qingtong's sleeves, Little Pig was about to jump through them. What did this woman say? She wants you to kneel before her? Damn it. Luo Qingtong had never even knelt before Yi Qianxian, okay? Now this princess of Great Yong wanted her to kneel? How shameless was she? Those from Blackfield who came with Luo Qingtong and didn't show up in the spiritual boat also had a slight change in expression. Luo Qingtong was their future mistress. How could she kneel before others? Not to mention that Xuanhuan was only the princess of Great Yong. Even if the emperor of Great Yong came in person, he didn't have the qualifications. The other party was really too arrogant. Immediately, those from Blackfield had a burst of cold anger on their faces. They suddenly jumped and were about to fly out. However, at this moment, the voice of Empress Dowager Yanxi, who had been silent all this time, suddenly sounded. Who said she doesn't have the qualifications to talk to you? Empress Dowager Yanxi's figure suddenly stood up from the luxurious carriage. The arrival of Luo Qingtong and grandfather Luo gave her the greatest strength to persevere. At this moment, the Empress Dowager, who rose from the throne with insignificant qualifications and protected the bloodline of the late Emperor of Great Chu, was full of vigor. Pass on this Empress's decree. Qingtong of the Marquis' residence of the Eastern Li nation, Fang Shumin, intelligent and thoughtful. She has won my heart. I am happy at first sight. From now on, she will be conferred as the Princess of Great Chu and will enjoy the honor of being the princess of the first wife. Empress Dowager Yanxi didn't seize a personal matter for herself because of the position of Empress Dowager of Great Chu. But today she was going to be selfish for once. If she watched her granddaughter being forced to kneel in front of her, she didn't deserve to be a grandmother. She didn't deserve to be the Empress Dowager of Great Chu. She would like to see who dared to humiliate her granddaughter in front of her. Empress Dowager Yanxi. Hearing Empress Dowager Yanxi publicly supporting Luo Qingtong, it was clear that she was deliberately opposing the Great Yong sacred dynasty. Great Yong's 7th prince's face was filled with anger. From his point of view, Empress Dowager Yanxi's temporary bestowal of Luo Qingtong as the princess of Great Chu was clearly an excuse to slap Great Yong's face. But he didn't expect that Empress Dowager Yanxi just wanted to protect her granddaughter from being bullied. Xuanhuan also believed that Empress Dowager Yanxi was deliberately slapping Great Yong's face. But to help Luo Qingtong? She looked at Empress Dowager Yanxi, who stood up with a stern expression and smiled faintly. Empress Dowager Yanxi, have you forgotten something? Xuanhuan slowly stood up from his seat. The embroidered gown slid down the table in front of her. This Imperial Highness is not only Great Yong's first Imperial Princess, but also an Imperial Princess with the title of Holy. With the addition of Great Yong's imperial fate, My status is honorable and noble, surpassing all the imperial descendants of the 4 great sacred dynasties. Even if Luo Qingtong is the princess of Great Chu, she still has to kneel and salute me when she sees this imperial highness. In front of this imperial highness, she has no right to not kneel. Feng Yuan's voice was cold. Even if Empress Dowager Yanxi obstructed her today, she still wanted Luo Qingtong to kneel and kowtow to her. He wanted her to humiliate her elegance in front of him. No one could suppress her in front of her. This Luo Qingtong was no exception. Princess Feng Yuan. Empress Dowager Yanxi was furious. Bestowing the title of Holy was only possible after praying to heaven and opening a temple. Even if she immediately bestowed the title of Holy on Luo Qingtong now, it would have no effect. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed at this moment. She looked at Feng Yuan and was about to speak. Chapter 758. What if I say that she is qualified? As this voice rang out, in an instant, a figure appeared in front of the crowd. Yi Qinming was dressed in silver and had black hair. His incomparably handsome face was hidden under a dark golden mask. That pair of extremely cold eyes stared coldly at Feng Yuan in front of him. The ice-cold light that shot out from those eyes caused Feng Yuan's entire body to feel a chill. Blackfield Mingzun. When they saw Yi Qinming's figure appear, everyone present was shocked. This Blackfield Mingzun almost never appeared in front of others. Those who could see him were all the top experts of the 4 sacred dynasties. Ordinary Saint Realm experts were not qualified to meet him, let alone other people. Many people in the Great Chu Imperial Palace had heard of his name, but they had never seen Mingzun in person. This included the 7th Prince of Great Yong. At this moment, everyone looked at Yi Qinming, who suddenly appeared with shock in their eyes. And the one who was even more shocked was Feng Yuan. This first princess of the Great Yong sacred dynasty was completely humiliated by Yi Qinming's words. She was in a very sorry state. That's right. She was the first princess of Great Yong and the one who was conferred the title of sage. Her status was comparable to half of a sage emperor. But so what? No matter how noble and respected her status was, could it be compared to Yi Qinming? Blackfield Mingzun, the first master of the true Spill continent. Except for a few old monsters, no one could be compared to Yi Qinming. A man's words were like gold and jade. If he said that Luo Qingtong had the qualifications not to kneel, then Luo Qingtong had the qualifications. She didn't need any title, she didn't need any title. Just based on that one sentence of his, it was enough. All of Feng Yuan's pride and reliance were completely shattered by Yi Qinming at this moment. If Mingzun says there is, then there is. Feng Yuan clenched her silver teeth tightly. Her lips, which were pampered and maintained extremely well, were about to bleed from being bitten. Why? Feng Yuan was so jealous that he almost went crazy. She didn't dare to raise her head to look at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qinming, afraid that the latter would see the hatred and murderous intent in her eyes. Why was Luo Qingtong protected by Yi Qinming? In the Black Field, Mingzun had never appeared in front of others. No matter how much she begged, it was difficult for her to meet him. But at this moment she easily saw him. Because of Luo Qingtong and evil Dr. Ghost Eye. Thinking of these two people, Feng Yuan clenched his teeth. These two people had humiliated her to the extreme. Not only did evil Dr. Gui Tong steal Mingzun's favor, he even ruined her reputation as a heavenly doctor. She had ruined one of her good moves. And now, because of the Luo family's matter, the other party invited Mingzun to support Luo Qingtong. To Feng Yuan, she didn't put Luo Qingtong in her eyes at all. Even though she had been rejected by Yuanma in a roundabout way because of her, she had only casually sent a subordinate, who was even a martial royal realm expert. To her, he wasn't even comparable to the handyman by her side. And she had sent such a person because she had heard that Luo Qingtong had a pair of strange eyes. But now the other party had ruined her good plans. Not only that, but she had also received the protection of Mingzun in the Black Field. That was something that she couldn't even ask for. Chapter 759. Luo Qingtong looked at Yi Qinming, who suddenly appeared in surprise. She didn't know when this man came back. Luo Qingtong felt a burst of joy in her heart. She didn't notice that when she saw Yi Qinming appear, her eyes lit up. Yi Qinming noticed it. When he saw Luo Qingtong's gaze on him, his mood immediately brightened. This woman also missed him and was looking forward to his return. Thinking of this, he didn't feel so depressed when he heard that she had agreed to a bet with others and said that she would leave him if she lost. He walked towards Luo Qingtong. At this moment, Feng Yuan's voice suddenly sounded again. But Mingzun, if you protect Great Chu like this, aren't you breaking the agreement between the Blackfield and the four great sacred dynasties? There was an agreement between the Blackfield and the four great sacred dynasties. The four great sacred dynasties couldn't interfere with the matters of the Blackfield, and the Blackfield couldn't interfere with the matters of the four great sacred dynasties. After all, Ming-Zun of the Blackfield was too powerful. No matter which side he sided with, it wasn't a good thing for others. At this moment, Yi Qianming spoke out to protect Luo Qingtong, but Feng Yuan misinterpreted it as helping the Great Chu dynasty. After all, Empress Dowager Yanxi had just conferred Luo Qingtong as the Princess of Great Chu. Naturally, if Yi Qianming helped Luo Qingtong, it was also helping Great Chu. Originally, this kneel and not kneel was just a tit-for-tat between Feng Yuan and Luo Qingtong. Now, with Feng Yuan's words, it was directly raised to a fight between the sacred dynasties. Yi Qianming helping Luo Qingtong was breaking the rules. Hearing this, Yi Qianming's footsteps suddenly stopped. Behind him, Bei Qing and Feng Yu both frowned and looked at Feng Yuan. What was the matter with this Princess Feng Yuan? Her master had already spoken, yet she was still so unforgiving. These words were clearly trying to use the agreement between the Blackfield and the four great sacred dynasties to force Mistress to give in, so that she could continue to use her status to suppress the evil doctor. But she didn't know that the evil doctor was her master's only bottom line in reverse scale. Yi Qianming stared coldly at Feng Yuan. You want to follow the rules? His voice was cold. Good. In that case, I'll give the Great Yong sacred dynasty a rule. As he spoke, he flicked his sleeve. In an instant, with a boom, an incomparably vast aura of power that far exceeded the Saint Realm exploded from the depths of the Great Chu Imperial Palace. Feng Yuan's arrogant expression, which had been waiting for Yi Qianming to give in, instantly changed when he sensed this aura. This is... Her heart suddenly trembled. Transcendent Saint. It was another level above the Saint Realm. They were the true powerhouses who stood at the peak of the four great sacred dynasties. There were only a few such powerhouses in the four sacred dynasties, and there was one in each of the four great sacred dynasties. It was extremely difficult to alarm such powerhouses. They basically didn't care about the outside world anymore, and they wouldn't care about ordinary things at all. It was the same for the transcendent saints of the four great sacred dynasties. Unless it was a matter of life and death, they basically wouldn't appear. Otherwise, how could Feng Yuan and the others dare to openly plot to seize the throne of the Great Chu Empire? It was because the transcendent saint was in seclusion, and the Empress Dowager was in charge of the Great Chu Empire. They used the matter of becoming the Empress Dowager's husband to seize the throne of the Great Chu Empire. Once they successfully controlled the Great Chu Empire, even if the other party's powerhouses beyond the Saint Realm appeared, they wouldn't be able to do anything. After all, Great Yong also had transcendent saints. Chapter 760. Feeling the vast and majestic aura, Feng Yuan's complexion changed from green to white. She wanted to force Yi Qianming to give in so that he couldn't help Luo Qingtong and the others. But she didn't expect that he would directly call out the transcendent saint of Great Chu. In such a situation, she and the others, before she finished thinking, the seventh prince of Great Yong on the other side had already turned pale and leaned towards her in a panic. Yuan, you're in big trouble. Although he had always been a little afraid of this niece, the seventh prince of Great Yong couldn't help but reprimand her. Why did she have to go against that Luo Qingtong? Why did she have to make others kneel? Even when Ming-Zun of the Blackfield spoke, she still didn't forgive. This was great. If the transcendent saint of Great Chu came out and knew what they were going to do to Great Chu. Why are you panicking? Feng Yuan also panicked for a moment, but she soon calmed down. We're here to participate in the Empress Dowager's groom selection. Who can do anything to us? This time, the Empress Dowager's groom selection wasn't done by them. The people of Great Chu couldn't blame them. As long as they insisted that they had no other intentions, so what if the other party knew that their motives weren't pure? The only pity was that they couldn't use this to force Ming-Zun to give in. That Luo Qingtong escaped. Thinking of this, Feng Yuan suddenly gritted her teeth. Ming-Zun was so protective of the other party to this extent. That evil Dr. Ghost I had such a great influence on him. All of this should have been hers. If she had shown her medical skills earlier and gained Ming-Zun's appreciation, she would be the one who was protected and spoiled. Thinking of this, Feng Yuan felt a burst of hatred. When the aura exploded, Luo Qingtong was also a little stunned. There was actually such a strong person hidden in the Imperial Palace of Great Chu? Then how could he be forced to this extent by the people of Great Yong? Do you think it's so easy to alarm such an expert? Little Pig saw through her thoughts and rolled his eyes. Moreover, this is the Empress Dowager's search for a groom, not a large-scale attack by Great Yong. If it wasn't for Yi Qianming, this expert wouldn't have been alarmed. This kind of powerhouse is the one who stabilizes the fate of the nation. I won't make a move for no reason. Luo Qingtong nodded her head in understanding. I see. As she spoke, her expression suddenly changed. It was a good thing that Yi Qianming called out this person. Otherwise, when her grandfather and grandmother got married, this expert would suddenly appear. Great Yong's 7th prince had Great Yong's backing. Naturally, he wasn't afraid. But if she wasn't by Grandpa's side, wouldn't that be bad? Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong rejoiced. Then she thought, did Yi Qianming come here just for this? Otherwise, with this man's temperament, he would definitely be impatient to get involved in these matters. Even if he came back, he would definitely wait for her in the black field. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong couldn't help but look at Yi Qianming. The man's expression was indifferent. After alarming the transcendent saint of Great Chu, his gaze fell on Luo Qingtong. Or it could be said that since he appeared, his gaze had always been on Luo Qingtong. At this moment, when he saw the girl looking at him, the light in her eyes flashed, and he immediately understood. He snorted softly. This woman was smart and cunning and didn't misunderstand him. Otherwise, he would definitely settle this account with her when he returned. Previously, she used him as a bet. Even if he wasn't angry, he wouldn't let her off so easily. Chapter 761. The aura from the depths of the Great Chu Imperial Palace flew up quickly, and in an instant, appeared above the square. What's going on? Who alarmed me? The transcendent saint from the Great Chu Imperial Palace floated above the square, and his sharp eagle eyes instantly scanned the entire place. Anyone who was swept by his eyes felt as if they had been pierced by a needle. Those with slightly lower cultivation felt that the gaze was like a sharp blade, piercing their hearts and making them feel suffocated. It was as if they were about to die under this gaze. In fact, it was indeed so. The transcendent saint's sharp gaze could kill, and his aura was like a rainbow. This kind of expert had already reached the point where he could mobilize the power of heaven and earth with just a thought, and instantly kill weaker cultivators. What they cultivated was already on another level of power. Great Ancestor. When they saw the transcendent saint appear, everyone from the Great Chu Imperial Palace knelt down and greeted him. The transcendent saint did not pay attention to them, because he had already seen Yi Qianxian. Mingzun. Seeing the silver-clothed black-haired man standing there, the transcendent saint's expression was slightly surprised, and then it quickly turned to vigilance and doubt. You woke me up? I remember that we have an agreement with you. We acknowledge the existence of the Black Field, and you are not to attack the 4 sacred dynasties. Why have you appeared in the Great Chu Imperial Palace? Thinking that Yi Qianxian had come to cause trouble, the transcendent saint's aura instantly changed, and he looked at Yi Qianxian with a wary gaze. I have no interest in your Great Chu Imperial Palace. Yi Qianxian's voice was cold. I just don't want to break the rules. Your Great Chu Imperial Palace's matters, settle it yourselves. As he spoke, he flicked his sleeves and looked at Feng Yu beside him. The latter understood and stood up with a smile to explain, Great Ancestor, don't misunderstand. Your Empress Dowager is looking for a husband, and we, people from the Black Field, have also come to participate. We were afraid that people would say that we broke the agreement, so we woke you up. As he spoke, he glanced at the slightly pale Xuanhuan and sneered in his heart. She actually wanted to force her master to give in. This Princess Fengyuan really thought too highly of herself. Did she think that she was the evil doctor? In this world, other than Lord Evil Doctor, he had never seen anyone else who could make his master suffer. Groom selection? What marriage? Hearing Feng Yu's words, that transcendent saint instantly frowned. He looked at the people of Great Chu. Finally, the officials of Great Chu found a chance to speak. Immediately they knelt down and cried, telling all the things that Prince Ning had done. Had it not been for Yi Qianxian deliberately alerting a transcendent saint, these courtiers would never have been able to see him in their entire lives. Not to mention complaining to the other party about Ning Wang's actions. In fact, King Ning's actions were enough to sentence him to death. But because he was a direct descendant of the Great Chu Imperial Palace and was a prince, the courtiers could not do anything to him without solid evidence to prove that he was harmful to Great Chu. At most, they could only imprison him. This was also the reason why King Ning was so unscrupulous. Firstly, he did not rebel, and secondly, he did not plot to rebel. He only created an opportunity for others to have the opportunity to overturn the Great Chu Empire. With the previous emperor's edict as a guarantee, what was he afraid of? Who could do anything to him? Chapter 762. Bastard. Nonsense. How dare you tarnish the sacred name of our Chu royal family? The Empress Dowager's groom selection? Wasn't that putting their Chu empire on the chopping board, waiting for others to take it? What's more, how could their Chu empire have such a scandal as the Empress Dowager's groom selection? The person who came up with this idea not only had sinister intentions, but also made their Chu royal family the laughingstock of the world. The Transcendent Saint's face was furious, and he directly raised his hand. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged above the entire Chu imperial palace. Countless forces of heaven and earth gathered, converging into an incomparably huge palm in an instant, and swept towards the Prince Ning's residence in the holy capital of Chu. In the Prince Ning's residence, Prince Ning was lying on the bed in his room, recuperating. Hearing the endless reports from his subordinates, he learned that the 7th Prince of Yong and others had entered the Chu imperial palace to force him to abdicate. He was very proud in his heart and he smiled coldly. Empress Dowager Yanxi also had such a day. That bitch made him the laughingstock of the entire Chu and even the world. Then he would let her have a taste of this. The feeling of being forced didn't feel good, right? She wanted to help his imperial brother protect this empire, but he wouldn't let her. She wanted to protect this empire, fine. She could just die. Without her, the Empress Dowager Yanxi, wouldn't Great Yong's conspiracy not succeed? Thinking of this, Prince Ning smiled sinisterly. At this moment, rumble. Above the sky there was a sudden sound of thunder. Prince Ning was proud in his heart, but when he heard this he frowned. He just saw that the weather outside was fine. Why did thunder suddenly appear? Just as he was about to ask the guards outside what was going on, he heard a burst of panicked voices outside. And, heaven's might. Quick, run. Those voices were panicked and frightened. Before Prince Ning could react, there was a boom, and the main courtyard pavilion he was in was instantly overturned. Rumble. The sound of explosions rang out. Prince Ning was still lying on the bed, and when he looked up, he saw a huge palm carrying a majestic force, grabbing towards him. Oh! How dare you attack me in the holy capital of Chu? Don't you know that I am the Prince of Chu? A direct descendant of the Chu royal family. Prince Ning screamed and yelled at the same time. He was grabbed by the giant hand and was instantly dragged to the top of the Chu imperial palace's sacrificial ceremony square. All the bones in his body were almost crushed into powder. Just as he was about to curse at the person who had captured him, his voice suddenly stopped. On the square, a group of people looked at him indifferently, coldly, or gloatingly. As for the figure sitting in the middle, whose entire body was brimming with powerful and terrifying power, his face instantly turned pale. Granduncle. How could this be? How could this be? Granduncle Huang was supposed to be in seclusion, so why would he appear here? This was a transcendent saint. At the thought of what he had done, Prince Ning's face turned pale. The teeth in his mouth were also chattering. Imperial Granduncle? He desperately wanted to explain, but that transcendent saint didn't care about him at all. I don't have a royal descendant like you. You actually dared to tarnish the reputation of my Chu imperial family and invite a wolf into the house. Your death is not enough to be regretted. Chapter 763. Rumble. In the sky, the huge hand that was grabbing Lord Ning suddenly clenched as the Transcendent Saint moved. Ah! Prince Ning's scream was incomparably mournful. His flesh, blood, and bones were all crushed into pieces by that pinch. Blood drifted down from the sky. The Transcendent Saint's expression was cold as he clenched his fist. Blood refinement. Along with his voice, Prince Ning's shattered flesh and blood were all wrapped up by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. In the next second, streaks of blood-colored aura were extracted from Prince Ning's flesh and blood, converging into a drop of crimson blood. At the same time, blood-curdling screams came from Prince Ning's residence. Then, countless tiny bloodline auras flew out and merged into the drop of blood in the Great Chu Palace. Feeling the powerful and vast aura in the drop of blood, Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows and asked Little Pig in her mind, "What's that? Prince Ning's blood? But that's not right. The power contained in this drop of blood is extremely powerful. Even Prince Ning's strength isn't that strong. How did he refine such a powerful drop of blood? It's the imperial bloodline in his body. This transcendent saint from the Great Chu imperial family is refining the power of the imperial bloodline in his body," Little Pig explained to Luo Qingtong. Those who have surpassed the saint realm can pass on their power through their bloodline. The 4 sacred dynasties were able to stand tall in the eastern region and rule over countless powerful countries because of their bloodline. They have many experts among them, as many as the clouds. If it weren't for the fact that Great Yong was the one who forced Great Chu, ordinary people wouldn't have any ideas about them. However, there is a limit to the power of the bloodline. As time passes, if there are no more experts who have surpassed the Saint Realm, the bloodline will gradually disappear, Little Pig explained to Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong nodded. So that's how it is. She suddenly thought of Yi Qianxian's heavenly veins physique. That man's strength is definitely beyond the Saint Realm. No wonder those people on his side would stuff him with beauties every day. It didn't matter how many of them died. It was no wonder that such a powerful man would act like he had never touched a woman before. Luo Qingtong couldn't help but laugh when she thought of the first time Yi Qianxian saw her, and the angry look on his face when she deliberately tried to get close to him. Boom. After the bloodline was refined, the transcendent saint waved his hand and summoned the drop of blood into his hand. Then he said coldly, "Don't worry, it's too late. King Ning's lineage is hereby stripped of their status as a direct descendant of the Great Chu imperial family and reduced to commoners. From now on, you can no longer consider yourself as a disciple of the imperial family of the Darchu dynasty." This transcendent sage's words directly pushed everyone from King Ning's mansion to the bottom of the valley. After doing all this, his gaze immediately shifted to Great Yong's seventh prince and grandfather Luo. He snorted with a cold expression and was about to order the Empress Dowager's groom selection to be annulled. At this moment, Feng Wan's voice sounded. "Ancestor of Great Chu, since King Ning has been executed and the Great Chu imperial family has been cleaned up, shouldn't we continue with the Empress Dowager's groom selection?" Chapter 764. Feng Wan's complexion was pale. However, she still gritted her teeth and endured the pressure of the transcendent saint to say these words. Feng Wan was not reconciled. She was just one step away. This transcendent saint could not guard the Chu imperial family forever. As long as imperial uncle could become the Empress Dowager's husband, she would have a way to control the Chu imperial family. Ning Wang was dead. In the future, the Chu imperial family would be Empress Dowager Yanxi's world. There would almost be no more opportunities like this in the future. She could not let go of this opportunity. Looking at her, Luo Qingtong's eyes flashed. She also wanted to stop that transcendent saint's decision, but since Feng Wan had made a move, then she would just watch the show. After all, this kind of action that drew hatred was not easy to do. Luo Qingtong looked at Feng Wan's pale face and her tottering figure under the transcendent saint's pressure. When this matter was successful, she would thank her on behalf of grandfather and grandmother. Impossible. That transcendent saint looked at Feng Wan coldly. In the history of the imperial family, there has never been a precedent of the Empress Dowager remarrying. It is even more impossible for the Empress Dowager to choose a husband. This matter was all caused by Ning Wang, that scum of the Chu imperial family. My Chu imperial family does not recognize this Empress Dowager's marriage. As he spoke, he directly pressed down on Feng Wan. Yuan. Great Yong's seventh prince and others were frightened by this pressure and hurriedly came to pull Feng Wan, but she waved them away. Feng Wan had a stomach full of anger, and the ambition that had died before it even started. How could she let it go? If she left now, then Luo Qingtong and evil Dr. Ghost Eye would benefit. Feng Wan's cold gaze swept across Luo Tong. The other party clearly had an affair with Empress Dowager Yanxi. If she left, with Ming Zun's strength, who knew if the Chu imperial family would agree to them being together in the end? Feng Wan would never allow such a thing to happen. She would never let Luo Qingtong and evil Dr. Ghost Eye get what they wanted. Chu imperial ancestor. Feng Wan said coldly, "The Empress Dowager's marriage was announced by your Chu imperial family. I don't care about the reason, since your Chu imperial family has released such news." Imperial family's imperial family. Now you're saying that the Empress Dowager's groom selection is invalid. Are you deliberately fooling the world? Imperial family. The dignified imperial family of the Chu dynasty is so untrustworthy, casually deceiving everyone. Imperial family. Imperial family. Imperial emperor. If this transcendent saint from Great Chu insisted on canceling the Empress Dowager's groom selection, Great Yong would have an excuse to send troops to Great Chu. This little girl, what a sinister mind. He was actually so determined to obtain Great Chu. The transcendent saint from Great Chu was so angry that his eyes were burning. He wished he could slap Xuanhuan to death with his sleeves. But he couldn't. The other party was Great Yong's holy conferred princess. Unless he wanted to start a war with Great Yong, he absolutely could not touch her. And with Great Chu's current situation, it was obviously not suitable for them to clash with Great Yong, the second strongest of the 4 great sacred dynasties in China. Chapter 765. Isn't Great Yong being too overbearing? Her expression was indifferent as she stepped on Xuanhuan's words with a smile. Great Chu's ancestor might not want to cancel the Empress Dowager's groom search. Perhaps he just looks down on Great Yong's people. That's why he said such words. Don't tell me that Great Yong's people will also fly into a rage out of humiliation? Only you are allowed to come for the groom search, and others are not allowed to look down on you? There's no such thing as coercion in business, let alone a groom search. That's right. Hearing Luo Qingtong's words, the transcendent saint from Great Chu seemed to have found a way out and followed her words. I indeed look down on Great Yong's people. That's why I deliberately said that. As he spoke, his gaze swept coldly across Great Yong's 7th prince. In reality, to this transcendent saint from Great Chu, no matter who came from Great Yong, he would not let that person become the Empress Dowager's husband. Otherwise, wouldn't he be inviting a wolf into the house? Just as Xuanhuan thought, he could not always guard Great Chu's imperial family. If that was the case, he would not have to wait for Great Yong to steal the country. If his cultivation regressed, would he still need to wait for Great Yong to steal the country? They would be able to fight their way in openly. Therefore, even if this Empress Dowager's groom search was to end, he could not let Great Yong's people succeed. Thinking of this, the transcendent saint from Great Chu's gaze immediately landed on Yi Qianxian. Mingzun, didn't you say that your people from Blackfield also came to participate in the groom search? If it was someone from Blackfield, he could be at ease. This transcendent saint from Great Chu was originally unwilling to continue holding the Empress Dowager's groom search. It was too shameful for the imperial family. However, Xuanhuan was aggressive and was obviously determined to win. Under such circumstances, he naturally could not give Great Yong's people an excuse or opportunity. However, if he wanted to continue, he had to find someone he could be at ease with. In this world, who could contend against Great Yong and make him feel completely at ease that Great Chu's throne would not be stolen? Naturally, it was the Blackfield. With Mingzun's strength, even if he coveted the throne of Great Chu, he didn't need to resort to such underhanded means. Not to mention, with the other party's temperament, he didn't even care about treasures that appeared in the world, so why would he scheme to seize the throne of Great Chu? With that thought in mind, the transcendent saint from the Great Chu glanced at Beiqing and Fengyu. There were only the 2 of them standing by Yi Qianxian's side. The other experts of the Blackfield were all in the spirit ship. Ahem, exalted ancestor, it's not us. This, Luo Tong. Fengyu and Beiqing quickly clarified and pointed at Old Master Luo. Of course he couldn't call him Old Master now. Both of them directly called out their names. Him? The transcendent saint from Great Chu looked at Elder Luo suspiciously. There was no other reason. The other party's strength was simply too weak. With such strength, how could he win against the Great Yong sacred dynasty? The transcendent saint from the Great Chu sacred dynasty felt depressed. At this moment, Yi Qianxian spoke. He can win. He believed that woman would definitely not participate in the Empress Dowager's groom search without confidence. Since she dared to bring Old Master Luo, it proved that she was already confident of winning. Although he didn't know what she would do, Yi Qianxian believed in Luo Qingtong. That woman was always able to give him a different kind of joy and surprise. Chapter 766. All right. Since Yi Qianming had said so, the transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty could only believe it. In fact, he had no choice. Unless he was willing to be forced by the Great Yong people and give in. But that was impossible. Therefore, he could only place his hopes on Old Master Luo. He only hoped that he could win like what Mingzun said. The transcendent saint of the Great Chu thought and suddenly said, Luo Tong, right? As long as you can win this time, I will confer you the title of Empress Dowager of the Great Chu and marry Empress Dowager Yan Shi. At the same time, I will confer your granddaughter the title of Princess Saint. Do your best. Yes. Old Master Luo was very excited. He did not expect that he could be recognized by the Great Chu sacred dynasty's royal family. This transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty's royal family had spoken. Basically, there would be no obstacles to his marriage with Empress Dowager Yan Shi. In the future he could always be with Yan Shi. Thinking of this, his heart was suddenly filled with fighting spirit. Imperial Granduncle, you can rest assured. Grandpa Luo was so happy that he directly called the Transcendent Saint by the wrong way. Cough. Luo Qingtong could not help but cough softly. My grandfather. Take it easy. Don't be too excited and accidentally offend him. However, the Transcendent Saint of the Great Chu Sacred Dynasty snorted coldly and did not say anything. Although the Empress Dowager's remarriage was a scandal of the royal family, it was nothing compared to protecting the Great Chu Sacred Dynasty. Moreover, the other party was from the Black Field and had Ming Zun as his guarantor. For the Great Chu Sacred Dynasty, it was not a bad thing. Therefore, the Transcendent Saint of the Great Chu Sacred Dynasty immediately turned a blind eye to Old Master Luo's slip of the tongue. Otherwise, what could he do? He still had to rely on the other party to defeat the Great Yong people. Moreover, Ming Zun was watching from the side. Could it be that he had to slap his face? Did he think that the Great Chu Sacred Dynasty had stood for long enough and wanted to change dynasties? However, Empress Dowager Yanxi looked nervous. When she saw that the Transcendent Saint did not intend to pursue the matter, she was relieved. On the contrary, Luo Qingtong was not anxious at all. With Yi Qianming around, she was not worried that anything would happen to her grandfather. Luo Qingtong herself didn't notice that she, who had always felt insecure, would unconsciously relax when Yi Qianming was around. She, who had always been the one to shoulder the burden when the sky fell, finally had a moment where she could rely on someone else. You overestimate yourself. Seeing Grandfather Luo excitedly agree to the Transcendent Saint's words, Great Yong's 7th Prince had a sneer on his face. At this moment, he had already extricated himself from the fear of the Transcendent Saint. His niece was right. So what if the other party knew that they had ill intentions? The Empress Dowager's groom selection was arranged by Prince Ning. It had nothing to do with them. As long as they insisted on this point, even a transcendent sage would not be able to do anything to them. Moreover, this was indeed their best opportunity. This Luo Tong was just a marquis from an inferior country. Who knew what kind of luck he had to have in order to reach the martial emperor realm? The difference between them was like heaven and earth. Not to mention that he went all out, even if he gave him a handicap, he would not be able to win. Great Yong's 7th Prince sneered and unconsciously said these words. Hearing this, Luo Qingtong immediately raised her eyebrows. Is that so? Since Great Yong's 7th Prince is so confident, then please give him a handicap. Chapter 767. Fine, I'll concede. Do you think this prince doesn't dare? The 7th Prince of Yong glared at Luo Qingtong coldly. Do you think you can win by using words against me? So what if I concede to them? The difference between the martial emperor realm and the sage realm is like heaven and earth. Furthermore, I was born in the Great Yong dynasty. My strength is not comparable to an ordinary sage realm cultivator. What can they use to compete with me? Thinking of this, the 7th Prince immediately said, This prince will concede to you using both hands and feet. Before he could finish his words, Xuanhuan's cold voice suddenly rang out. I can concede to you using both hands and feet, but my 7th imperial uncle has paid such a huge price. If there are any accidents in the competition later, you can't blame Great Yong. Don't you think so? After all, life and death are all fated. As soon as she said that, the expressions of the people around her changed. Xuanhuan's words were clearly murderous and wanted to kill Grandfather Luo. With her words, even if the 7th Prince killed Grandfather Luo in the competition later, he would have an excuse. Hearing this, the 7th Prince of Yong reacted and immediately said, That's right. Since this prince has restricted my strength, if I accidentally use too much strength in the competition later, it won't be this prince's fault. As he said this, the murderous intent on his face was revealed without a doubt. My niece still knows how to use the other party's words to suppress us. The other party wants to take advantage of me? Sure. Exchange it with your life. The 7th Prince of Yong smiled malevolently. All right. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. Since that's the case, let's make a life and death agreement. To prevent anyone from going back on their word. What else could Luo Qingtong say when someone voluntarily came to seek death? Naturally, she would help them. Originally, she was still thinking of how to deal with these people from Great Yong, but now she didn't need to think anymore. The other party came to her on their own accord. Later, she would let this first princess and first genius from Great Yong know what it meant to lift a rock and smash one's own foot. All right. Hearing Luo Qingtong's answer, Xuanhuan sneered. She was afraid that they would go back on their words and not restrict their strength. It was a pity that people from low-level countries were people from low-level countries. They were ignorant. Even if Imperial Uncle's whole body was tied, her grandfather couldn't beat him. He was just asking for humiliation. Later, she would ask the royal uncle to humiliate her grandfather. Then he would be tortured to death in front of her. As Xuanhuan thought, he suddenly luo qingtong wan luo. During this process, Yi Qianming had been sitting steadily and had people stop Empress Dowager Yanxi's desperate actions. He believed that the woman wouldn't do anything that she wasn't confident in. He also believed that she wouldn't joke around with her grandfather's life. Did that mean that she really had a plan? Yi Qianming raised his eyebrows slightly. It allowed a martial emperor to defeat a sage realm expert. He had to admit that Luo Qingtong had piqued his curiosity. Shua. Old Master Luo signed the life and death agreement in front of him boldly. For Empress Dowager Yanxi not to mention a life and death agreement, he would even dare to go through a mountain of swords and a sea of flames. What's more, he still had the soul-borrowing diagram drawn by his granddaughter. Thinking of the powerful force he once felt, Old Master Luo clenched his fists. Chapter 768. Boom. Old Master Luo's figure landed directly on the high platform. Idiot, you can't wait to die. Great Yang's 7th Prince sneered, and with a leap, he also appeared on the high platform in the square. Swoosh. As the two figures appeared on the high platform, the transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty also raised his hand. A powerful defensive light instantly shrouded the high platform. This defensive light would only disappear if one of the two died. And when the transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty made his move, Yi Qianxian also looked up indifferently. Swoosh. A ray of light instantly swept out from the man's sleeve. It split into two in midair, and instantly tied up Great Yang's 7th Prince's hands and feet. Since the other party had signed a life and death agreement with Old Master Luo, Yi Qianxian naturally would not give him any chance to break free and cheat. Under the restraint of his aura, Great Yang's 7th Prince's hands and feet seemed to be glued together, and could not be separated. Seeing this scene, the transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty suddenly smiled. He originally wanted to ask Ming Zun to make a move. After all, he did not trust the people of the Great Yong sacred dynasty. Of course, the other party did not trust him either. Therefore, he could only ask Ming Zun to make a move. He did not expect that the other party had already made a move without waiting for him to speak. It seemed that Luo Tong was indeed from the Black Field, and was highly valued by Ming Zun. Otherwise, why would a dignified underworld venerable lower himself to do such a thing? This thought made the transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty a little more confident in Old Master Luo. After all, if Ming Zun valued someone so highly, there must be something extraordinary about him, right? But he did not know that the other party valued someone else. Seeing Yi Qianxian's move, Luo Qingtong's eyes were smiling. This man actually made a move personally. It was really a waste of talent. But with him making a move, Great Yang's 7th Prince could forget about breaking free. He could only wait to be beaten up by his grandfather on the stage. Feng Wan's gaze also abruptly froze. His hands under his sleeves could not help but abruptly tighten. She didn't expect Yi Qianxian to take care of such a small matter himself. A dignified underworld venerable was paying too much attention to this small Luo family. Just because of evil Dr. Ghost Eye? Wasn't he spoiling her too much? Feng Wan felt another burst of jealousy and hatred. He couldn't get what he longed for, but it was easily grasped by another person. And that person had once defeated and humiliated her on the spot. This made Feng Wan even more depressed and resentful. 7th Imperial Uncle, don't kill Luo Tong so easily. Torture him for me. She transmitted her voice to the 7th Prince of Great Yong, gritting her teeth tightly. Evil Dr. Gui Tong wanted to protect the Luo family and help him win the Empress Dowager's groom selection. She would not let him do as he wished. Yuan, or don't worry. This Luo Tong ruined our plans. Even if you didn't say it, I wouldn't let him die so easily. Great Yong's 7th Prince transmitted his voice back coldly. His hands and feet were bound, but he was not completely defenseless. It was just that he could not use some cultivation methods and martial techniques. But with his strength that had just entered the Saint Realm, what cultivation methods and martial techniques did he need to use against a martial emperor? He could easily beat the other party into a dog. Chapter 769. Let the competition begin. The voice of the transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty rang out. In an instant, the 7th Prince of Great Yong sneered. In an instant, his entire body flew up and rushed straight towards Old Master Luo. Now, he was going to beat this man from an inferior country who dared to snatch his woman and spoil his plans in front of everyone. Let me give you a handicap? Even if I give you a handicap, my strength is enough to beat you to a pulp. The seventh prince of Great Yang's face was extremely ferocious. He sneered at old Master Luo in front of him. With a boom, the power around him exploded. The vast and majestic power of heaven and earth gathered from all directions in an instant. The so-called Saint Realm expert had cultivated his martial arts to the extreme and had transcended mortality to become a saint. A Saint Realm expert could use his own strength to attract the help of the power of heaven and earth. He could also command the spiritual power of heaven and earth and plunder the spiritual power of those who were weaker than him. In other words, when facing a Saint Realm expert, an expert below the Saint Realm would not be able to absorb any power from the surroundings. When the power in his body was exhausted, he would completely become an empty shell. He would have a powerful cultivation but would not be able to use it. This was the terrifying part of a Saint Realm expert. Of course, there were many times when they wouldn't even be able to wait until their strength was exhausted before they were killed by the terrifying might of a Saint Realm expert. Rumble. As the power around the seventh prince of Great Yong gathered, the spiritual power of heaven and earth in all directions moved strangely. All of it turned into the power of the seventh prince of Great Yong and suppressed old Master Luo. Luo Tong. Seeing this scene, Empress Dowager Yanxi could not help but worry in her heart and stood up immediately. At this time, she did not care whether she would anger the transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty. No one knew Luo Tong's strength better than her. This man, before she chased him away, was only a martial emperor. She did not know what method he had used to directly raise his strength to the martial emperor level. After jumping so many levels, no one knew how much foundation he had damaged. It was very likely that his life was ruined. It was impossible for him to make any further progress on the path of martial arts. Under these circumstances, how could he contend against Great Yong's seventh prince, who had just entered the Saint Realm? The difference between the martial emperor realm and the Saint Realm was 2 whole realms. Even if Great Yong's seventh prince's hands and feet were bound, he still possessed the strength of someone who had just entered the Sage Realm. Thinking of this, Empress Dowager Yanxi's heart instantly felt a sharp pain. She clenched the dagger in her hand. Suddenly he made up his mind. That was, if Luo Tong died here, then she would not commit suicide. She would marry Great Yong's seventh prince and then find an opportunity to perish together with him. She had already done all she could for the Great Chu. However, she felt that she owed Luo Tong too much. Thinking of how she had always been angry with him because of the past, brooding over what had happened back then and treating him coldly, the tears in Empress Dowager Yanxi's eyes continued to flow down. If she had known that this day would come, she would have treated him well. The two of them were in perfect harmony. Luo Tong. She got up recklessly and was about to rush to the place where the high platform was. At this moment, there was a boom, followed by old Master Luo's loud and sonorous voice in an instant. Chapter 770. As old Master Luo's voice rang out, everyone's eyes instantly focused on him. Then, except for Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, everyone's expression changed drastically. Oh my God! Boom! In an instant, the seats of the many courtiers of the Great Chu were flipped over by them. Everyone looked at the scene on the high platform in shock. Some people were even flipped over by their own seats and fell to the ground in a sorry state. Everyone's face was filled with shock and stupefaction. The scene in front of them was really beyond their common sense. On the high platform around old Master Luo, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was gathering. The power of the sage state. Oh my God! Everyone looked at this scene with their mouths agape. This was not King scientific at all. Was this really not a hallucination? Everyone looked at the aura of power around old Master Luo in shock. Martial Emperor Realm. Martial Emperor Realm. Martial Emperor Realm. What the CK? But who could tell them what the spiritual chi of heaven and earth that was gathering around him was? Could it be that Great Yong's seventh prince felt that it was too boring for him, a sage state expert, to fight a martial emperor realm expert, so he deliberately gave some of the spiritual energy to him so that he could fight himself? What nonsense! They could tell that the spiritual energy around him was completely different from the one gathered by Great Yong's seventh prince. It was obvious that old Master Luo had gathered the spiritual energy himself. So who could tell them how the hell did he do it? This was like seeing a ghost. If a martial emperor realm expert could gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and use the power of the sage state, then what was the use of those sage state experts? This was simply impossible. But the reality in front of them told them that such an impossible thing had really happened. What the CK? Bei Qing and Feng Yu were also stunned. Like xianxia, they had guessed that the evil doctor must have a backup plan. That was why they dared to bring old Master Luo to the groom selection. But what the f*ck, this backup plan was too frightening. A martial emperor realm expert had the power of a sage state expert? How were those saint realm experts supposed to live? More importantly, those experts who had reached the martial emperor realm? No, those experts who had reached the martial emperor realm and above would all go crazy. After all, who wouldn't want to have the power of a sage state expert in advance? And those powerful forces and clans would probably go crazy as well. After all, with such a method, their families would have many experts who were comparable to the sage state experts. Damn it, this could completely reshuffle the power balance of the continent. After all, how terrifying the power of a sage state expert was. If a family suddenly had many experts, Bei Qing and Feng Yu shuddered at the thought. Oh my god, the evil doctor, this was amazing. He had pierced through the heavens. He stared unblinkingly at the young girl below the stage who was as beautiful as a flower. Such a slender and weak body, yet it often hid an ability that made him feel incomparably surprised and astonished. Every time. She was like a huge treasure, tempting him to dig deeper, but he could never get enough of her. This was the woman he loved. Chapter 771. Buzz. As Yi Qianxian's sleeves fluttered. In an instant, a huge wave of power emanated from his body. In an instant it suppressed everyone. Boom. Following the explosion of power from Yi Qianren's body, the various gazes in the area instantly froze. Especially the transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty sitting next to Yi Qianxian. His eyes lit up when he saw the surging aura around old Master Luo. When he felt the aura exploding from Yi Qianren's body, his sparkling eyes instantly froze. Almost instantly, everyone reacted. Luo Tong was from the Black Field. So the fact that he possessed the power of the Saint Realm, which defied common sense, was something the Dark Domain did for him? Could it even be related to the Black Field's Ming Zun? Thinking of this, the dark thoughts in everyone's hearts that had yet to breed were instantly annihilated. If it was related to the Black Field's Ming Zun, then no matter how good and coveted this method was, it was not something they could covet. The transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty also secretly lamented in his heart. If it were not for the Black Field and not related to Ming Zun, he would definitely do anything to obtain the method that could allow a martial emperor to possess the power of the Saint Realm. But now he shook his head. But soon he was happy again. Not for anything else, but because Luo Tong was proposing to Empress Dowager Yan Shi. In other words, Luo Tong would be considered half a member of the royal family in the future. Under such circumstances, the royal family of the Great Chu sacred dynasty still had an advantage over others. After all, others might not be able to get this method from Ming Zun, but they could take a detour from Luo Tong. Thinking of this, the transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty immediately calculated that after Luo Tong's proposal was successful, he must try his best to win over Luo Tong and befriend him so that Luo Tong would be of the same mind as the royal family. This was a great blessing for the royal family of the Great Chu sacred dynasty. While the transcendent saints of the Great Chu sacred dynasty were overjoyed by this, Feng Yuan's palm broke all of his fingernails with a snap. Her hands were dripping with blood. Who would have thought that the Blackfield Underworld Venerable would actually do this for evil Dr. Ghost Eye? A method that could allow a martial emperor to possess the strength of a sage expert. How precious was that secret method? For the sake of the Luo clan's people, for the sake of their successful marriage proposal, Ming Zun didn't hesitate to reveal such a secret technique and let everyone know? As Feng Yuan thought about it, the jealousy in his heart was about to go crazy. On the high platform, Great Yang's seventh prince looked at the lingering power of the Saint Realm around Grandfather Luo's body, and his heart was filled with shock. This is impossible. The power of Saint Stage. The aura in your body is clearly that of a martial emperor. The other party's strength was pitifully weak. How could he use the power of the Saint Stage and draw upon the power of heaven and earth? When Great Yang's seventh prince saw this scene, he nearly went crazy. No one would be able to accept the fact that a bug and a piece of trash that they thought they could easily crush had suddenly transformed into an expert that was almost as strong as them. This is impossible. The seventh prince of Great Yong shouted sternly. You must be using an illusion to confuse me. This prince will not be confused by you. However, before he could finish his words, Grandfather Luo had already launched his attack on the other side. Is that so? Then you should personally experience whether this is an illusion or reality. Chapter 772. In an instant, the attack surged towards Great Yong's seventh prince like a tidal wave. Sensing the undoubtedly frightening power within, Great Yong's seventh prince's complexion turned ugly. He was about to dodge when he suddenly realized that he was too shocked to move against Old Master Luo. He had forgotten about it and stopped in his tracks. He was now a ready-made target. At such a close distance, the seventh prince had no way of dodging. He wanted to extend his hands to block and defend. But his hands and feet were all tied up. Could he break free from the power of the Black Field, Mingzun? Even if the seventh prince used all his strength, it was still impossible. At this moment he finally understood what it meant to be caught in a trap of one's own making. Bang! That attack landed heavily on his body with a boom. In an instant, the seventh prince of Great Yong was swatted away like a fly. One had to know that the spirit-borrowing diagram that Luo Qingtong drew for Old Master Luo was equivalent to someone who had just entered the Sage Realm. It was similar to his strength. But don't forget. In order to show how powerful he was and that he could defeat Old Master Luo in a matter of minutes, he directly said that he would give up his hands and feet. Now that his hands and feet were tied up, and the spiritual energy that Old Master Luo was borrowing was not weaker than his. This time, the seventh prince of Yong was in for a tragedy. Bang! His body slammed into the light that enveloped the stage. Then he was bounced back by the vast and majestic power and landed heavily on the ground. Not only did he fail to show off, he was also struck by lightning. That was the seventh prince of Yong. The seventh prince of Yong struggled to get up from the stage. Before he could even finish his sentence, Old Master Luo appeared beside him. There was a time limit to the spiritual energy that the spirit-borrowing diagram could borrow. With Luo Qingtong's strength, the spirit-borrowing diagram that she drew could only last for 15 minutes at most. Hence, Grandfather Luo remembered his granddaughter's words. Without further ado, he stepped forward and started the fight. It was a pity that Great Yong's seventh prince did not even have the chance to say a single harsh word. In an instant he was sent flying back and forth on the stage by Grandfather Luo like a sandbag. Looking at his miserable state, the crowd no longer doubted that Old Master Luo was a saint. At the same time he was filled with sympathy for Great Yong's seventh prince. He wasn't as unlucky as him. You're a martial emperor level expert, yet you can easily crush trash. Unfortunately, the husky had turned into a Tibetan mastiff and tortured himself into a dog. Who do you think would have thought that something like this would happen? Who would have thought that a martial emperor would have the strength of a Saint Realm expert? The seventh prince of Great Yong had truly been tricked to death. Moreover, he had even signed a life and death agreement with the other party. Thinking of this, everyone felt that they were being cheated. Previously, he had thought that Great Yong's seventh prince was too treacherous and that Luo Zongye was doomed. Looking at it now, it was clear that the seventh prince of Yong had buried himself in a pit. How could this only be described as miserable? However, although they were lamenting, the people of Great Chu were still extremely happy. After all, they were happier than anyone else to be able to see the people of Great Yong being tortured. They had let the other party be so arrogant and complacent. They even dared to dream of encroaching on the throne of Great Chu. They would be tortured to death. As for the people of Great Yong, their faces were already pale. Your Highness? They looked at xuanhuan with pale faces. Chapter 773. With a boom, Great Yong's seventh prince was viciously smashed into the defensive barrier on the side of Great Yong's army with an extremely distorted posture. The light pillar that shrouded the high platform was splattered with blood. The seventh prince of Yong, who had just been showing off in front of Great Chu, Empress Dowager Yanxi and the others, scolding Old Master Luo for overestimating himself and thinking that he was a trash from an inferior country, was now smashed into the light pillar like a dead dog. His twisted and mangled face faced Great Yong's army. Soon after he breathed his last. The seventh prince of Yong was dead. In the Empress Dowager's groom selection, the Marquis Luo Tong from the inferior country of Dongli defeated the seventh prince of the Yong sacred dynasty and won. This result was like a resounding slap to the face of Great Yong's army. Especially xuanhuan's face. She had previously asked the seventh prince to torture Old Master Luo so that he would not die so easily. Who knew that the one who would be tortured like a dog in the end was the seventh prince of Yong? The more confident she was before, the more she would be slapped in the face this time. Her previous ambition had completely turned into a joke now. What was even worse was that she was the one who proposed this life and death duel. She wanted to torture Old Master Luo to death so that she could vent her anger on him. She did not want to send the seventh prince of Yong directly into the pit. If not for her proposal, the seventh prince of Yong might have lost, but he might not have died. After all, the transcendent saints of the Great Chu sacred dynasty would not watch the 7th Prince of Yong die in the Great Chu sacred capital and cause trouble for Great Yong. However, xuanhuan was full of confidence and directly handed the knife to the other party, allowing the other party to kill the 7th Prince of Yong openly without any worries. Thinking of this, xuanhuan's throat suddenly tasted blood. She boasted that her plans were flawless and she was incomparably smart. At the age of 12, she began to control her father and the Yong court. However, this was the first time she had been tricked by her own schemes to such an extent. She had directly tricked her 7th uncle to death. Pooh! A mouthful of blood surged to xuanhuan's throat, but she forcefully swallowed it back down. She couldn't lose her composure in front of Yi Qianxian and Luo Qingtong. He let them see his sorry state. Especially Luo Qingtong. This woman. If it wasn't for her grandfather, how could his plan have failed? And that evil Dr. Ghost Eye. If she hadn't helped the Luo clan and invited Mingzun to help, how could he have miscalculated? Xuanhuan felt a burst of hatred in his heart. But following the death of Great Yong's 7th prince, the defensive barrier covering the stage began to dissipate. Ah! Qingtong Grandpa won. Grandpa Luo stood in the middle of the stage and laughed at Luo Qingtong. There was an indescribable joy in his heart. He had never thought that there would be a day when he would be able to defeat a Saint Stage powerhouse as a martial emperor. That feeling was simply too awesome. His granddaughter was simply too powerful. No wonder her subordinates were always clamoring about how she was a reincarnated immortal. In Grandpa Luo's opinion, even a reincarnated immortal wouldn't be as powerful as his granddaughter. Looking at Grandpa Luo's happy face, xuanhuan's expression became even colder. Let's go. She stood up abruptly and appeared on the stage in a flash. She raised her hand and grabbed the corpse of Great Yong's 7th prince. Chapter 774. Whoosh! A figure appeared in front of Great Yong's 7th prince's corpse even faster than her. He raised his hand and grabbed the corpse. Then he disappeared in a flash. Sumeru spatial artifact. Seeing the other party's actions, xuanhuan fiercely clenched his teeth and looked at the beautiful girl standing in front of him with jealousy and coldness. Luo Qingtong. Looks like the evil Dr. Ghost Eye treats you well. How could a mere daughter of a marquis from an inferior country possess something like a Sumeru spatial artifact? Obviously, it must have been given to her by the evil Dr. Ghost Eye. And where did the evil Dr. Ghost Eye come from? Obviously it came from the Black Field. It was given to her by Mingzun. After all, a Sumeru spatial artifact that could store a corpse was not an ordinary Sumeru spatial artifact. The 4 great sacred dynasties had very few of them. Other than Mingzun, where else could the evil Dr. Ghost Eye get it? This Luo Qingtong was really lucky. Thinking like this, xuanhuan looked at Luo Qingtong as if poisoned. Return my uncle's corpse, she said coldly. Like the Prince of Ning, the 7th Prince of Yong also had the bloodline power of the Yong royal family. If this bloodline power was collected, it could create another genius of the royal family. This was the reason why the transcendent saint of the Chu sacred dynasty deprived the Prince of Ning of his bloodline power after he executed him. This kind of bloodline power could help warriors advance and comprehend realms better. After all, it inherited the cultivation experience and techniques of experts above the saint realm. Possessing the power of these bloodlines was equivalent to temporarily opening up a cultivation path that led to experts above the saint realm. Of course, after reaching the saint realm, everything depended on the warrior himself. This bloodline power could not help. But even so, this bloodline power was powerful enough. Moreover, the 7th Prince of Yong had already reached the saint realm and was a direct descendant of Yong. The bloodline power in his body was not ordinary. Luo Qingtong knew the benefits of this bloodline. Naturally, she was unwilling to let go of Great Yong's 7th Prince's corpse. Moreover, the people of Great Yong had come aggressively and humiliated her grandmother. They were even delusional enough to lay their hands on her grandfather. Would it be alright if Great Yong's 7th prince died? Luo Qingtong expressed that there was no such thing. My apologies, Princess xuanhuan. The life and death agreement states that life and death are determined by the heavens. After ascending the stage, everything will be at the mercy of the other party. It's written in black and white. You won't deny it, will you? Luo Qingtong looked at xuanhuan, who had a cold expression on his face. The smile on his lips was indescribably evil. Since Great Yong's 7th prince is dead, then his corpse should naturally be handled by us. As for how to deal with it, I believe that your great Yong doesn't need to concern yourself with it. You. Xuanhuan was so angry that he gritted his teeth. This was indeed written in the life and death agreement. But it was deliberately written in order to better torture grandfather Luo. They were only talking about the punishment on the stage. When did they say that they were going to punish the corpses as well? But at that time she did want to let 7th Imperial Uncle torture grandfather Luo to death and then let him torture his corpse. But she did not expect that Luo Qingtong would use this against her. Luo Qingtong, don't go too far. Xuanhuan's voice was cold. Chapter 775. Great Yong's 7th prince's corpse contained a large amount of bloodline power, which was very important to the Yong royal family. Even if the corpse was to be lost outside without Great Yong's secret method, it was impossible to extract the bloodline power from it. But losing this bloodline power was also a great loss to the Yong royal family. The Great Yong sacred dynasty would never allow such a thing to happen. So, the Great Yong sacred dynasty is not going to abide by the rules of the life and death agreement that you just made? Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows and looked at Xuanhuan. But this is not up to your Great Yong sacred dynasty, right? This life and death agreement was signed under the witness of the Blackfields Mingzun and the Chu royal family's Saint Transcendence. I'm afraid your Yong royal family is not qualified to break it. That's right. The Saint Transcendence of the Great Chu sacred dynasty could not wait to see the people of the Great Yong sacred dynasty suffer. Luo Qingtong's refusal to release the corpse of the 7th Marquis of Yong did not benefit him in any way, but he was happy to see the Great Yong dynasty lose the bloodline power of a Saint Realm cultivator. Princess Xuanhuan, this life and death agreement was proposed by you, and it was you who wanted to sign it. Now you are going back on your words. Are you treating me and Mingzun as nothing? When the Saint Transcendence of the Great Chu sacred dynasty said this, he finally vented his anger of being forced by Xuanhuan to continue the Empress Dowager's groom selection. He said coldly, not to mention you, even if the Saint Transcendence of your Great Yong sacred dynasty came, I'm afraid they would not dare to say this in front of me and Mingzun. His words made Xuanhuan bite her lips for a while. Her expression was ugly. She looked at the Saint Transcendence of the Great Chu sacred dynasty, and then looked at Yi Qianxian, who was sitting there with an indifferent expression and did not even lift his head. She suddenly gritted her teeth and said, I must bring the corpse of 7th uncle back. As she spoke, she turned to Luo Qingtong and said, Luo Qingtong, I won't say much to you. Let's have a match. Do you dare? Xuanhuan stood proudly on the high platform, raised his head and said, I will suppress my strength to the same level as you, let's have a match. If you lose, you have to return 7th uncle's corpse to me. If I lose, then from now on, our Great Yong imperial family will never utter a word about 7th imperial uncle. Not only that, I can also promise on behalf of Great Yong that we will not offend Great Chu for the next 10 years. As soon as Xuanhuan spoke, the expression of the transcendent saint from the Great Chu changed. Within 10 years they would not invade Great Chu. This promise was a little heavy. If he had 10 years, the new emperor of Great Chu would be able to slowly grow up. Empress Dowager Yanxi's eyes also narrowed. Great Yong's covetous eyes on Great Chu had always been a hidden danger in her heart. Now that Xuanhuan made such a promise, with her title of Holy Princess, this promise was still valid. Moreover, she had made the promise in front of the Blackfields Mingzun and the Transcendent Saints of Great Chu. Everyone looked at Luo Qingtong. The eyes of the people of Great Chu were full of anticipation. The lips of the Transcendent Saint from the Great Chu sacred dynasty also twitched. However, he did not speak in the end. After all, Xuanhuan's strength was not weak. Even if he suppressed his strength, he was at the same level as Luo Qingtong. Chapter 776. What's more, Xuanhuan was the first princess of the Great Yong sacred dynasty, the first genius. When she was at Luo Qingtong's level of strength, she could kill people of the same level in seconds. Now that she had suppressed her cultivation, her strength was only higher than before. Under such circumstances, unless Luo Qingtong was a genius even more amazing than Xuanhuan. Otherwise, even if Luo Qingtong agreed to compete with her, she would not win. Thinking of this, the Transcendent Saint of the Great Chu suddenly shook his head. At this moment, Luo Qingtong's voice sounded. Okay. Luo Qingtong looked at Xuanhuan in front of her with a playful expression. Lower her strength to fight with her? She was worried that she would not have a chance to teach the first princess of the Great Yong sacred dynasty, the first genius. She did not expect that the other party would send the opportunity to her. It also came with a promise to not invade the Great Chu for 10 years. This was a gift she gave to the Great Chu sacred dynasty on behalf of her grandfather. After all, the previous emperor of the Great Chu saved her grandmother. This was a thank you gift for that year. I'll compete with you in this round. Xuanhuan sneered. She knew that Luo Qingtong would agree. After all, her grandfather was about to marry the Empress Dowager Yanxi of the Great Chu. How could she not express anything? She deliberately promised not to invade the Great Chu for 10 years, and she really took the bait. However, this promise of his was not something that could be won by just anyone. Xuanhuan's expression was proud. Luo Qingtong thought too highly of herself. She would know the difference between her and her in a while. She was determined to get the corpse of the 7th imperial uncle. She would definitely get it back. As for Luo Qingtong, she also wanted her to be humiliated in front of everyone and lose all her face. Thinking of this, Xuanhuan suddenly said coldly, "Then let's fight." As she spoke, her strength and aura dropped to the same level as Luo Qingtong. At this moment, Xianxia spoke. "I feel that this is still not enough." As he spoke, he raised his hand and a ray of light enveloped the platform where Luo Qingtong and Xuanhuan were. In just an instant, Xuanhuan felt his body suddenly sink as if he was bound by something. It was clear that the barrier of light that Yi Qianren had conjured had shrouded her and also restricted the strength of her body. The physical strength of the martial spirit realm and the martial king realm were not on the same level. Every time a martial artist's strength increased, the strength of their body would be strengthened accordingly. A truly powerful high-level powerhouse, even if they didn't use any strength, might not be able to move a low-level powerhouse just by standing there. At this moment, Yi Qianxian had suppressed Xuanhuan's physical strength to the same level as Luo Qingtong's. Now, the only advantage that Xuanhuan had over Luo Qingtong was the comprehension and application of strength and techniques. Luo Qingtong looked at Yi Qianxian with a smile in her eyes. This man was really afraid that she would suffer a loss. However, with Xuanhuan's previous physical strength, Luo Qingtong was prepared to end the battle quickly. But now, Luo Qingtong's lips curled up, looking indescribably evil and enchanting. At this moment, with a bang, Xuanhuan, who was on the other side, could no longer hold back the jealousy in her heart. She raised her hand and pulled out her weapon. In her hand she held an extremely shiny black whip. It had a dragon head and fish pattern and was covered with sharp barbs. It looked extremely sharp and cold. This was not the weapon that Xuanhuan was most proficient in, but it was the most vicious weapon in her hands. Chapter 777. Luo Qingtong, are you ready? If you're ready, let's start. Xuanhuan said coldly. In the next second, with a swoosh, she rushed towards Luo Qingtong. Today she was going to use this long whip to whip Luo Qingtong until she was drenched in blood. Boom! Xuanhuan's attack was ruthless. Almost at the same time she moved, the long whip was like a poisonous dragon coming out of its cave. With a swoosh, it flew towards Luo Qingtong. Bang! Seeing the long whip coming towards her, Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. In an instant her figure moved. She stepped to the side and dodged. Rumble! Xuanhuan's long whip flew past Luo Qingtong's figure and directly hit the place where she was standing. In the blink of an eye, the gold and wood tiles there exploded with a loud bang. In the next second, Xuanhuan's eyes suddenly narrowed. Her gaze swept towards the place where Luo Qingtong was dodging. She raised her hand and whipped. Rumble! Following the movement of her hand, in the blink of an eye, the long whip that was like a long nail fiercely embedded in the marble floor suddenly burst out like a poisonous dragon from the marble floor. In the blink of an eye, that barb ripped across the floor. The floor tiles, which were several meters thick, were instantly shattered. Dust flew all over the sky. Xuanhuan's white robe flew out from within. In the blink of an eye, that long whip was like a dancing dragon and fiercely lashing towards Luo Qingtong. Bang! Luo Qingtong, dressed in a voluptuous red dress, stood there as if she was stunning the years. The wind and thunder sword in her hand was impressively unsheathed. Clang! A metallic sound rang out. In the blink of an eye, countless sounds of wind and thunder seemed to come from that metallic sound. In the blink of an eye, the long whip and the wind and thunder sword collided. It was like a giant beast meeting a divine weapon. Boom! Boom! In an instant, the two figures were entangled together. As the black whip danced wildly, the wind and thunder swords formed an impenetrable defense. Luo Qingtong's figure was entangled with Xuanhuan's. The two of them were actually evenly matched. What? Seeing this scene, everyone below the stage was in disbelief. The people from Great Yong and Great Chu were stunned. Especially that transcendent saint from the Great Chu sacred dynasty. He originally thought that Luo Qingtong would definitely lose against Feng Yuan. After all, Feng Yuan's true strength was a martial spirit realm expert. What kind of concept was the martial spirit realm? He was about to transcend mortality and enter sainthood, entering the saint realm. But at this moment, Feng Yuan suppressed his own strength. Under the situation where his comprehension of the realm and the use of strength and skills were higher than Luo Qingtong, he was actually unable to do anything to Luo Qingtong. Didn't this mean that Luo Qingtong's talent and strength was much stronger than Feng Yuan, the first princess of the Great Yong sacred dynasty, the first genius? Oh my god. Such a genius was actually from an inferior marquise household? She was actually so unknown? If she was in any of the 4 sacred dynasties, they would have worshipped her like an ancestor long ago. What did the inheritance of the family and the continuation of martial arts rely on? The family's genius. The more genius disciples there were, the stronger their strength, and the more prosperous the family and power would be. A genius like Luo Qingtong was enough to support a super family in the sacred dynasty. In the future, she would be heavily nurtured. As early as when she started to remember things, she would be sent to the sacred court and become famous. Chapter 778. However, this transcendent saint of the Great Chu sacred dynasty did not know this. Although the name Luo Qingtong was unknown, the name of the evil Dr. Ghost Eye had already spread throughout the entire True Spill continent. While the crowd was still in shock, Yi Qianren, who was on the viewing platform, raised his eyebrows slightly. This was not the true strength of this woman. She could kill a martial king when she was a martial master, but she was now evenly matched with Feng Yuan. What was she trying to do? A cat playing with a mouse? Yi Qianxia knew Luo Qingtong's strength. Even if he did not expose the martial skill he had taught her, it was impossible for her to lose to Feng Yuan with her current strength. Moreover, he had also suppressed Feng Yuan's physical strength to the same level as hers. So what was this woman playing at now? Behind him, Bei Qing and Feng Yu were also surprised. However, their surprise was completely different from that of the Great Chu and Great Yong. Strange, why do I feel that the evil doctor is deliberately restraining her strength? Yes. When she was in the Tianyu imperial family, she could already kill a martial emperor in seconds. Even if she did not want to use Master's heaven-conquering art, she should have already beaten Feng Yuan to the ground, right? After all, Feng Yuan's physical strength is only at the level of a martial king. Even if she is a genius with extraordinary talent, and can display the strength of a martial emperor in the martial king realm, she can't be the evil doctor's opponent. That's right. The two of them muttered. Bei Qing and Feng Yu were very familiar with Luo Qingtong's abnormality and ferocity. Even if she did not use Yi Qianxian's move with Luo Qingtong's strength, it would not be a problem to deal with Feng Yuan, whose cultivation was suppressed to the martial king realm. The latter thought that he was a genius and could defeat Luo Qingtong at the same level. In fact, Luo Qingtong was the true abnormality of abnormalities. Not to mention the same level, it was normal for her to kill people 2 levels above her. Feng Yuan was a member of Great Yong's imperial family and had access to countless resources. This had forcefully raised her talent from 10 points to 12 points. But Luo Qingtong didn't have anything. She came out from a marquis mansion in an inferior country. Their identities, environments, and the resources they had were completely different. From this, it could be seen that Luo Qingtong's talent was extraordinary. Her strength was abnormal. Bei Qing and Feng Yu had seen too much of Luo Qingtong's sword sweeping. Now that they saw her and Feng Yuan fighting each other, the corners of their lips twitched. This doesn't seem like the evil doctor's style. While everyone was surprised and puzzled, Luo Qingtong was dealing with Feng Yuan's moves while carefully observing her moves. Feng Yuan's strength was far above that of a martial king. When she attacked, she would unconsciously use the strength of a martial king, but it would soon be suppressed and she couldn't use it. In this process of raising and suppressing her strength, Luo Qingtong could see how her strength revolved and transformed. Boom boom boom. The two's figures intertwined. The more Feng Yuan fought, the more frightened and angry she became. Luo Qingtong's talent and strength were beyond her expectations. Her opponent was able to deal with her attacks with ease. Didn't that mean that if they were on the same level, she might not be Luo Qingtong's opponent? Evil Dr. Ghost Eye had crushed her alchemy talent, and now Luo Qingtong had crushed her strength and talent. Feng Yuan was burning with anger. She had always thought of herself as one of the best geniuses in True Spill continent. Besides a few geniuses on the soaring dragon list, she had no opponent on the infant phoenix list. But now Luo Qingtong had appeared. Looking at the young girl's figure fluttering like a butterfly's wings, Feng Yuan's eyes flashed with a sinister light. Chapter 779. Feng Yuan lashed out with the long whip in her hand. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of whip images appeared in her hand. Under the control of Feng Yuan's movements, the whip shadows flew towards Luo Qingtong like poisonous snakes, dragging long black rays of light. Those rays of light were all the aura of the spiritual power in the surroundings. Feng Yuan's strength was limited to the martial king realm. However, her understanding and knowledge of the use of power were all in the martial spirit realm. Based on the knowledge of this realm, it was enough for her to use a killing move that an ordinary martial king realm expert could not see through. Each of these long whip shadows carried a trace of the spiritual power of heaven and earth that a martial king realm expert could not use or comprehend. Only those at the martial emperor realm and above could use it. But now, Feng Yuan was using it in a battle between martial kings. Although it was only a trace of it, it still made her whip techniques carry a unique and fierce aura. Seeing this scene, the people on Great Chu's side below the stage couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Especially Empress Dowager Yanxi, who could not help but clench her sleeves. That exquisite silk was almost torn to shreds by her. Qingtong. Old Master Luo was also worried. Although his granddaughter was powerful, the opponent was the first princess of the Great Yong dynasty. Old Master Luo also knew that Feng Yuan was extraordinarily powerful, so when he saw this scene he could not help but feel worried. Behind Yi Qianxian, Bei Qing and Feng Yu also frowned. What was the evil doctor doing? If she did not take this seriously she might lose. Just as everyone was worried, Luo Qingtong was carefully sensing and adjusting the aura in her body. In her mind, Feng Yuan's ascension and descent just now flashed, the transformation of power, and the aura in her body also fluctuated and adjusted. 1 trace, 2 traces, 3 traces. The aura in her body imitated Feng Yuan's aura, and the transformation of power began slowly to a higher level. Rumble. The whip in Feng Yuan's hand was like a long dragon as it rushed towards Luo Qingtong. Above the whip shadow that carried the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, there seemed to be illusory dragon and snake shadows. It was an illusory form blessed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The force used by Feng Yuan had completely surpassed the level of the martial emperor realm. Even though her current strength were only at the martial king realm, even a martial emperor realm powerhouse might not be able to block this attack. Boom boom boom. The illusory dragons rushed towards Luo Qingtong. The high platform seemed to have been dominated by these illusory dragons. The only thing that was airtight were these long illusory dragons. Luo Qingtong's figure was almost invisible. Clear pupil. Just when Grandfather Luo and Empress Dowager Yanxi could no longer sit still, an incomparably powerful aura suddenly erupted from the high platform with a bang. Martial Emperor Realm? Everyone's faces were filled with shock and surprise. They did not know why such an aura suddenly erupted from the high platform. Wasn't Princess Feng Yuan's strength already restricted by Mingzun? Could it be that she could still break through the restriction of Mingzun's aura and increase her strength to the martial king realm? If that was the case, then Princess Feng Yuan's talent and potential were so powerful that no one could look directly at her. Chapter 780. Rumble. On the high platform, the long dragon of whip shadows that filled the sky suddenly surged backwards in the same manner as when it had arrived. Bang, bang, bang. The long dragon whip shadows were smashed into pieces. In midair, the embryonic form of spiritual force that had transformed into an aura quickly vanished into thin air. Under such a scene, Luo Qingtong's figure, which was covered by countless long dragon whip shadows, was revealed. Her red dress fluttered in the wind. Under the cover of the countless broken whip shadows, she looked like a war goddess who had rushed out from the mouths of countless fierce beasts, full of enchanting and domineering aura. What surprised the crowd even more was the aura emitted from her body. The martial royal realm. The aura just now was not emitted by Princess Feng Yuan, but by Luo Qingtong. My god, she directly raised her strength from the martial king realm to the martial royal realm in the battle with Princess Feng Yuan. It wasn't as if no one had ever seen an expert make a breakthrough in the midst of a battle. But no one could be like Luo Qingtong, who calmly broke through the limits of her strength under the pressure of a genius who was far stronger than her. It was known that Princess Feng Yuan's true strength was the martial spirit realm. Even if her strength was limited, she was not someone who could be defeated by an ordinary martial king. When other people were dealing with her, they had already exhausted all their strength and were exhausted. But Luo Qingtong directly broke through to the martial royal realm in the process of fighting with her. Didn't this mean that she did not use her full strength in the battle with Princess Fenghuan? The crowd suddenly widened their eyes and looked at the scene on the stage in disbelief. Feng Yu and Beiqing finally understood why Luo Qingtong was so strange before. It turned out that she was using Fenghuan as a stepping stone to improve her strength. The two of them thought of Fenghuan's strength being restricted to the martial king realm and immediately understood what Luo Qingtong was doing just now. She was observing and studying the transformation of Princess Fenghuan's aura in order to improve her strength. Oh my god. That's amazing. My evil doctor. This kind of strength increase method was really going to anger Princess Fenghuan to death. The latter was indeed infuriated. Rumble. When Fenghuan attacked Luo Qingtong, the numerous whip shadows were instantly shattered. Countless phantoms of long dragons whined in the sky, transforming into the most primitive embryonic form of spirit energy. Fenghuan's move was thoroughly broken by Luo Qingtong. She gritted her teeth and was just about to say that Luo Qingtong had violated the rules of the competition when she saw the boundless aura emanating from the young girl's body suddenly withdraw. In the next second, Luo Qingtong's figure flew up. Princess Fenghuan, you've been attacking all this while. Now it's my turn. As Luo Qingtong speaks, she directly pulls out the wind and thunder sword in her hand. Only then did the crowd realize that the wind and thunder sword in Luo Qingtong's hand is in a half-unsheathed state. She actually fought against Fenghuan in this state just now? She actually did not use her weapon all this time? The crowd was shocked and stunned. In the next second, the wind and thunder sword in Luo Qingtong's hand is unsheathed. In an instant, countless thunder-like sounds of the sword, accompanied by innumerable sounds of the wind, resounded. Wind and thunder sword cut. As the voice sounded, you're tuning in to this sword dance in the vast sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.